Hello. I just wanted to come and do a really quick video because I've had loads of requests to show other types of books, not just nature books. And I couldn't get all of my books out, but I thought I'd show you a few just to give you some ideas of what to look out for. I wanted to say, if you're in the UK, let me just turn my phone off, sorry. If you're in the UK, Oxfam have charity bookstores. And they also have online sales. So, you know, looking at Oxfam, if you're in the UK, is brilliant. And Amazon UK, Amazon US. And I know some of the books are on the US website, Amazon, because I've looked. You know, they're not as cheap, obviously, because most of the books that I showed in the previous video come from the UK. So the postage is a bit more expensive, where, you know, I can pick the books up for £2 or £3 and then the postage is about £2. So it's cheaper maybe to get the British books if you're in the UK. But there are, you know, so many different books out there. I don't know if any of you watched Jessica Rapp, but go and check out some of her book videos, because, you know, she's in the US and she picks up the most amazing books. So, you know, they're out there. One thing I would say is, if you're going book shopping, you do have to put in the legwork. You know, if you're going into charity stores or secondhand bookstores, you do have to take the books off the shelf to have a look through them, because the outside of the book is quite deceiving sometimes. So the first type of book I want to talk about is encyclopedias and similar types of books. These are fantastic. Now, one thing I would say is, if you don't have a lot of space like I don't, be careful how many sets of encyclopedias you buy, because I've got this full set, and I don't know, maybe 12 or so books in the set, but then I have this set, and I have another couple of sets, and I have various odd encyclopedias, like one out of a set. And I really am never going to use all of the pages. You know, there are hundreds of pages in a volume of encyclopedias. So you don't need full sets. You know, one or two of the right encyclopedia will keep you going for quite a long time. Don't make the mistake I made and, you know, buy a whole set. So this particular set, the covers are a bit pants, you know, they're in poor condition, but the pages in here are, you know, perfect. There are so many pages. This page, for example, would look absolutely cracking. It's about accounts, this particular page, but it would look awesome in a vintage journal or kind of any theme, really. Lots of diagrams on different types of electronics and things like that. So encyclopedias are a fantastic buy to use as book pages, and you can pick these up quite cheap, and again, they are so much cheaper than buying a paper pack, and they put a lot of interest between your pages. So this is another one. This is called The New Book of Knowledge, and again, loads and loads and loads of, I mean, look at that, that's gorgeous, isn't it? You know, lots and lots of pages that you can use in journals, in encyclopedias. So they are absolutely worth looking out for. This is another fantastic book. And one of the things I look out for is the thickness of the papers. This book, the paper is almost like a cardstock. It's like a lightweight cardstock. It's perfect for making tags. It's perfect for collaging onto. There are so many things you can do with these kind of pages, and to go with that, you know, this book is absolutely full of images that you can use. Okay, another great buy, and I have probably 3-4 copies of this Oxford Book of English Verse, various ages, but this type of book is fantastic. One, you can take out the individual verses, pop them into a tuck spot so you've got the full verse or poem or whatever it is, because poetry books, verse books, quotation books, all of those types of things just add some real interest to your journal. So, you know, they're worth looking out for, but you might not actually give this a second glance if you found it on a bookshelf, because you're going to know it's not full of pretty images, but sometimes images are not just the thing to go for. Okay, this is another great one. Dictionaries, language dictionaries, what are they called? You know, where it takes it from one language to another. These are fantastic because there is so much interest in having different languages in your journals. And again, you can use, you know, depending on the size of the dictionary. I've got some teeny weeny ones and I've got some bigger ones. You can cut out individual words and use them along your pages. You can add them to tags. You know, dictionary definitions they just make an awesome addition to a journal. Okay, now, put those there. This type of book, I mean, I picked this up for next to nothing. Look at the state of it. It looks a mess. But I have used so many pages from this book because it's generic. It's about London, so it's got some historical information in it. It's not offensive in any way, and these pages are just brilliant to either add to a journal, because I really love the feel of vintage pages in a journal. So look out for generic historic books that you can just add some interest. And again, you know, fantastic for collaging, adding to tags underneath an image. This type of book, for example, would be brilliant with some vintage kind of advertisements, like from the old design shop, or images on travel, that kind of thing. Okay, somebody asked about bird books. Unfortunately, this, apart from a couple that are pretty ripped up and don't have covers anymore, this is the only one that I have whole. Birds of Town and Village. It was 75p, and one of the things I wanted to talk about with these types of books is, you know, you might pick up this book and go, wow, look at that image, it's amazing, I'm going to buy that. What you need to do is think about how you're going to use it. It's a copyrighted book, so you can't copy it and shrink the image down. You are going to be using the page as it is. Now, this particular page, probably not going to be usable for a journal unless you are making a very large journal. You'd have to think about how you could cut it, how you could fold it to add it into your journal. Some of the pages are more usable than others. For example, this one, you could quite easily cut out some of these birds individually, use them as pockets and use them as tags. But, you know, that magpie, for example, this is not, to me, this is not a usable image. This part of the page maybe. So it's just worth thinking about. Again, these are kind of more usable because they're smaller birds, but you'd have to think about how is that going to look folded in half and on its side. This page would work, I think. You know, I'd quite happily put that in a journal, so the page was actually that way up. I don't think that's too bad, but you do have to think about those things when you're purchasing a book with such large images in. So that was just a little tip that I wanted to share with you. And then we go on to some more of the vintage kind of books. So, you know, this I picked up from a car boot sale. It was in a job lot. The whole lot was reasonably expensive because it had a lot of vintage things in it, and it was all different things. There was a few postcards, some stamps, various things in it. I think a couple of T-card books came alongside with this. But these type of pages, it's called the Pocket Companion, a handy reference book, and you know, there are the conversion tables and sunsets and seasons and when the dates are and all that kind of thing. So these would make fantastic journaling tags, journaling cards. They would also make a lovely little addition into an envelope, you know, as it is a whole page. So these kind of things are worth looking out for, things with information on, just to make things a little bit more interesting. It doesn't have to be as old as this one. I don't think there's a date on it, but it doesn't have to be, you know, ridiculously old, because you can use this type of information, but you can age it yourself. You can tea stain it, ink the edges. You know, quite often this type of information is in the front of diaries and things like that. Okay. this type of book. This is the Chaucer. If you're looking to make some quotations, this kind of book is brilliant for that. Now, if you saw that on a bookshelf, you might pass that by. This is what I mean about putting in the legwork and putting in a bit of effort. You might miss a real gem if you just look at the spine on a bookshelf. You need to take books off the shelf and have a look inside, because you just don't know what you might find. This is a book about the British Red Cross. I'm not quite sure what that is on my hand, but I have been holding the cat, so I'm a little bit worried about my hand. Oh dear. Anyway, I've got my puffer at the ready, and I'm full of antihistamine. This type of book again is great. The medical stuff, especially if you're into kind of macabre and if you're enjoying the Halloween stuff at the minute. This type of thing popped into a journal is just, I think it's fascinating. And even if it's not a macabre kind of book, you know, these types of images in a Poe book or Frankenstein book or something like that, I just think are beautiful. What's this one? Oh, this is just really a tag making book. So vintage pages. A lot of them are thinner than modern books. So they are fantastic for collaging onto tags. They're quite generic, so you could, excuse me. Sorry, they're quite, sorry, I do apologise. And these types of books are fantastic for collaging. You could glue 2 or 3 pages together and use them as tags. You know, look out for these, you know, very generic kind of plain text journal books. They don't all have to be photographs and pretty illustrations. Okay, this is a book that I'm asked about whenever I use a page of it. I have 2 or 3, I think I have 3, yes I do, I have 3 typewriter books, and I also have 2 or 3 shorthand books, and these again, loads of interest, really fabulous to look at. There's a coastal town fairly close to where I am, and there are 2 really good vintage bookstores. Now, one of the I think it might have even been this one, and the shorthand books, one of the shorthand books, they come from that particular bookshop. Now, if you want a book like this and you haven't been lucky enough to find it in a charity shop or a car boot sale or a garage sale or whatever it is you've been to, then you know you might have to be prepared to pay a bit of money. And if there are certain books that I just know I really want to use, then I know I can find it in one of these 2 bookstores, and I know that I'm going to have to pay a little bit more for it. I've also picked one of these up from a car boot sale, and I think I paid £2 for that. This one was, I'm sure it's this one. This one was more expensive, and it did come from that shop from Felixstowe. You just got to weigh up. Do you want to pay the price? Do you really want that book? You know, if you don't want it that badly, don't pay the money for it. But if you do, you sometimes will have to be prepared to pay. You know, it's not, books are not going to be free necessarily if they are what you really want to buy. And that goes for these 2. And this is again, I'm trying to get across that you need to take books off the shelf. These came from an Oxfam charity bookstore. They were just about £5 each, and they are very small, and they did not look very interesting. But because I took every single book off the shelf, I found that these were a proper treasure. The paper is absolutely beautiful, and the pages are amazing. And to me, even though these are very small, they're still in copyright, so I'm going to be using originals. To me, these were worth every penny. You may not think so, and they might be the kind of book that you put back onto the bookshelf if you find them in your local bookstore. But every now and then you find a book, it might be a little bit expensive for what it actually is, but you just may decide you have to have that book for whatever reason it is. And then you may decide you cannot take it apart and use it. And again, that's completely fine, isn't it? Because these books are amazing on a bookshelf, and you know, I've read through them several times, but I purchased these books to use in journals. And again, that's something else you need to decide. If you don't want to take it apart, don't take it apart. But if that's why you've bought it, don't feel bad for taking it apart. You know, you're giving life to something that will be used, as opposed to maybe sitting on a shelf and not being touched. This is another example of taking a book off the shelf and looking at it, because I saw this and it did not say anything to me at all. It's a modern book, but I mean, it was only £1.49, so it wasn't too expensive, but it is absolutely full of beautiful typefaces and quotes and sayings, which it's an uplifting book. And it's just, to me, you know, if I hadn't have taken this off the shelf, I would have missed out, because it is absolutely beautiful. And you know, you need to do that. Please do take your books off the shelf and actually have a look inside, because you might be walking away from a real treasure if you don't, you know, just put that little bit of effort in. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to go and take some more antihistamine, and I will be back very soon. See you later. Take